love to hear more about your process of working with materials. And when making art, you say, you may begin with the inspiration of available materials, or in other cases through idea development, which then leads to material exploration. So I'd like to get a better idea of how you explore materiality and meaning.
I tend to go back and forth. Sometimes I'll start with an idea or an interesting concept, and then I want to build off of that, and I tend to gravitate. Sometimes I'll have an idea, and then I have maybe a very inkling of how I would want to start going about it, and then I step into a store to get those materials, or I'm going somewhere, and then I have this other inspiration or direction that I could take because I see something else. There was one project that I did that involved a suitcase, and I had no idea why I wanted the suitcase until I was actually using it, and then I realized what the meaning was behind it. So sometimes I work like that instead, where I find the materials and then I build off of them and sort of culminate things.
It sounds like you're intuitively drawn to working with something, and then over the course of working with that particular object or material, you're brought to some understanding of perhaps why you were attracted to it in the first place.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with. I think that is very common for me to do, and then I have the rare times where I actually think of an idea, and I have to force myself to really think about what that idea is and then ways to represent that. But I think it's probably more accurate to say that many times I find the material that I really like, and then I'm like, I want to use this in this way, and then I realize why I like it later.
Interesting. So that leads me to ask about your other work in the show, Microscopic, and how you worked with a microscope on that work. Could we see a couple images and hear about your process in regard to that work?
Absolutely. So for this particular piece, I was thinking along the same lines of isolation and sort of scientific, research and coronavirus and those things. But I was also thinking heavily about the materials that we are using to protect ourselves. So vitamin C, Clorox wipes, gloves, hand sanitizer, and antibacterial soap. So all of these things I was thinking about, and how we're relying on science and scientists to look at the coronavirus and figure out some sort of answer for us. So I wanted to do my own sort of view into these items. So I took samples of 6 different items, and I will give you a bigger view of it. But I basically did a microscopic view into them, and I recorded them, and I have put them together into a final video with some interesting sound effects and plays to give this sort of calming feel, but also a bit of a little bit of intensity to it. So I'll play a little bit of it. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear it. Just let me know. But give you a little snippet of it.
Nice. It's it's interesting, the shape of the microscope watching the video, at times it's hard to know what you're looking at, which I like. It's almost like you're looking at the moon, which I think alludes to cycles, which I could relate to some of the rest of the conversation we've had. All of your work in general makes me think about ideas that are related to ephemerality, definitely, yes, as we've talked about. Also, the sort of fragile nature of life and mortality. And but with the microscope piece, with microscopic, you move into this other realm that makes me think of, protection.
I would say that, thinking about life and everything, of course, and protection, cycles is certainly something that I was thinking about as well, especially when looking at these materials and actually like on a similar path, but I was thinking a little bit about the environment as well and how we are using these things and sort of what we do with them, and like this is what makes up a nitrile glove, or this is what makes up a Clorox wipe, or toilet paper. So it's just interesting to think about, but I certainly would say so, in terms of thinking about cycles and stuff.
I feel like there's also this element in microscopic where, in the flower piece, you're working with this very natural kind of substance, and not everything in the microscopic piece is unnatural, but some of it's chemicals. So it's interesting to think about protection and these things that we're using to protect ourselves. In some cases might actually be toxic.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I know that's something I've thought about throughout this whole pandemic. I'm not someone who uses Lysol or hand sanitizer or anything like that on a regular basis before this.
Right.
And then next thing you know, we're being told we need to use Lysol wipes and hand sanitizer and all of these very unnatural things to keep ourselves safe and clean. It's a very interesting juxtaposition that we're in, and I think you captured that nicely in the two pieces. The contradictions, the contradictions that we're all, I think, having to deal with.
I think it's funny that you say it, because that is actually something that I had been thinking about sort of briefly on the outskirts of it, but it's also something that I want to work towards, after college, after my career, is trying to find out different and more efficient and environmentally safe and consumer beneficial in their health. It's just like ways of doing things and interacting and different stuff like that. So it's cool.
Yeah, I also, in terms of, I have a formal question actually about your choice in the microscopic piece to capture it in like this, this kind of vertical form where the circle is kind of cut off a little bit. I found that to be an interesting visual choice that made me think to myself, I know this is meant to be a circle, but the circle has been cut off, interrupted. It's not whole. It's not whole in the image. Was that a choice, like a choice that you made that was, I don't know, to explore some of those kinds of ideas? Or
so part of that, I would say partly yes and partly no, in the sense that I was limited in the manner in which I could capture it. But in doing that, it also sort of, if you're thinking about circles and, the circle of life for the moon and like the earth and things like that, it sort of like breaks the cycle. And it also, instead of keeping things contained, although contained within, your screen or an image or a moving image, it's still moving and adjusting, and now there's this open space for things to expand. so this sort of the push and pull between being condensed and confined versus really expanding and sort of branching out too, I think, which is an interesting concept to think about, I think.
Yeah, confinement is something we're all feeling pretty intensely right now, I would say.